brought down in by Tisha B'Av, a famous story where on the Russian border, so they changed the border and they split this town that was in between Russia and another country, and the Jews in the town had a big problem because the split went that in the Russian part of the town used to be the graveyard, but now it turned, and because they changed the borders, the graveyard was now in the other country, and the Russians had a border and they didn't allow anything into their country. So the people had a problem. If a Jew died in the town, right, they had to get to the other side, but there was a border, and they didn't let anyone go across the border. So they got permission to cross the border only by a funeral. So some of them got along and got together and said, this is amazing. If we have the right to cross the border for a funeral, we could smuggle anything from our side of the border to the other side of the border. We'll make believe there's a funeral. We'll take the casket. We'll fill it up with whiskey and all kinds of gold and jewelry and all kinds of stuff. We'll smuggle it across the border, and then we'll sell it, and we'll make a lot of money. And they're not going to stop us because they allow us to go across the border when there's a funeral. So they got a couple of guys together, and they built themselves a coffin, and they filled it up with all kinds of illegal goods. And they came to the border, and they crossed the border, and the policeman that was standing by the border went to his boss, and he said, something's wrong here. You got to open up that box. So they called the police, and they stopped the funeral, and they said, put the coffin on the ground, we want to see what's in it. And they were like, are you crazy? You don't open a coffin of a dead body. You're going to dishonor the body. And the captain of the police says, open the box. And they opened the box. Of course, they found all this jewelry and all this stuff, the contraband that they were going to sell. So they call him in front of the headmaster, the head guy, and he says the punishment for smuggling is death. All three of you guys are going to be shot by a firing squad for trying to smuggle into our country. And these three guys started to cry. The Dugmar Maggid says the story. And they started to cry. And they started to beg. And they said, but we have children. And we have a wife. And then grandchildren. And they need our, and you can't, if you're going to kill us, they're going to starve. And they're crying and the water's dripping down their eyes. And he says, set them up for the firing squad. And they're like, don't you have a heart? What's wrong with you? We just told you we have children, grandchildren. And he said the following. He said, now it's too late to cry. You see, how did we know that you weren't carrying a body? We don't open coffins. But when you came across the border with the coffin, the three of you were joking around. And you were talking to each other and you were laughing. So we knew that there was something wrong. If you would have cried when you came across the border, we would have never opened up the coffin. Now you're crying? Now it's too late. If you would have cried when you were supposed to cry, then you wouldn't have to cry now, says the Dugmar Maggid.